"I'll take the meeting in my own boardroom," I said, watching my assistant nod and head toward the reception area. A small smile played at the corners of my mouth as I straightened my tie. There was something undeniably satisfying about those words. My boardroom in the building that once housed the company that had thrown me out with nothing but $200 in my pocket and a cardboard box of personal belongings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My phone buzzed with another notification. The fifth message. Today from Robert Hayes. "Megan, please. We need to talk. I had no idea it was you behind the acquisition. Let me explain everything." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, took a deep breath, and opened the door to face the man who had once told me I'd never be more than a glorified assistant. How quickly things change when the person you underestimated becomes the one signing your paychecks. Before I dive deeper into this story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. If this journey of rebuilding from almost nothing resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special coming your way. My name is Megan Carter. 16 months ago, my mentor, Elaine Foster, the founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations, lost her battle with a rare autoimmune disease, leaving behind a groundbreaking software platform, a thriving tech company, and, unfortunately, a business partner of 4 years who revealed his true colors the moment she was gone. I stood in the parking lot that rainy Thursday afternoon, watching through the glass doors as the security guard collected my badge. Inside, Robert Hayes was already directing IT to revoke my access credentials and email. I was 29 years old with an MBA and 5 years at Horizon, where I'd risen to become Elaine's chief of staff and protege. Yet in that moment, I felt completely powerless. My Honda Civic now contained whatever I could grab from my desk before the surprise termination meeting ended: my personal laptop, a few family photos, a small potted succulent Elaine had given me on my first work anniversary, and a worn notebook filled with her business insights and advice. What they didn't know was that I'd also downloaded backup copies of my project files and presentations onto my personal drive. Nothing proprietary or confidential, just my own work that I'd poured hundreds of hours into. "Your position has been eliminated in our new organizational structure," Robert had said coolly across the conference table, sliding a manila envelope toward me. "Inside, you'll find details of your termination package, 2 weeks severance, which frankly is generous, given the company's current financial recalibration." Financial recalibration. A convenient corporate euphemism for what I knew was actually happening. Robert was systematically dismantling Elaine's vision to replace it with his own. When I opened the envelope later, I found a check for just under $200 after taxes, not even enough to cover next month's rent. Elaine had founded Horizon Innovations 6 years earlier, around a revolutionary customer experience platform that helped small and mid-sized businesses compete with larger corporations. She had built it from her apartment with nothing but determination and vision, securing seed funding against incredible odds as a female founder in her 40s. Robert had joined 2 years later, bringing connections to venture capital firms and enterprise clients. He quickly made himself essential to the business operations while Elaine focused on product development and culture. I had been one of Horizon's first 10 employees, joining right after completing my MBA. While many of my classmates chased prestigious consulting jobs or joined major tech corporations, I chose Horizon because of Elaine. During the interview, instead of grilling me on case studies or technical skills, she had asked thoughtful questions about my values and vision for the future of business. "Technical skills can be taught," she'd said. "Critical thinking, empathy, and integrity can't." Under her mentorship, I had grown from an eager but inexperienced graduate to a confident leader who understood every aspect of the business. She had taken me to investor meetings, included me in strategic planning sessions, and trusted me with increasingly significant projects. "I'm grooming you for something bigger," she would say. "This company will need your perspective long after." "I'm gone." That made Robert's betrayal all the more painful. He had waited barely 3 weeks after Elaine's funeral to begin his takeover, leveraging his position as COO and his relationships with 2 key board members to consolidate power. His first move was eliminating those most loyal to Elaine's vision, including me. "You can't just throw away everything she built," I had protested during that final meeting, my voice tight with disbelief. Robert had simply adjusted his designer glasses, a birthday gift from Elaine months earlier. "The market has changed, Megan. Elaine's approach was innovative for its time, but Horizon needs to evolve. Perhaps if you'd focused more on business fundamentals instead of playing favorite to Elaine, you'd understand that sustainability sometimes requires difficult decisions." The casual cruelty of his dismissal left me speechless. For 4 years, I'd witnessed his subtle undermining of Elaine's authority, his gradual repositioning of himself as the adult in the room to investors. Now, with her gone, he was systematically erasing her influence from the company she had created. I spent that night in my apartment staring at my nearly empty bank account. Between student loans, my car payment, and San Francisco rent, I had less than 2 months before financial catastrophe. The tech job market was competitive even for those who hadn't been abruptly terminated, and Robert's connections in the industry were extensive. I had no illusions. He would make finding another position locally nearly impossible. The next morning, I made 2 decisions. First, I would leave San Francisco immediately to stretch my meager resources. Second, I would find a way to preserve and revive Elaine's vision, not out of revenge, but because I genuinely believed in what she had built. Her approach to business had never been just about profit. It was about creating tools that democratized success, that gave smaller players a fighting chance against industry giants. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I called my college roommate, Zoe Patel, who had moved to Austin after graduation to join a tech incubator. "I need somewhere to crash while I figure out my next move," I explained after sharing what had happened. "My spare bedroom is yours for as long as you need it," she said without hesitation. "Austin's tech scene is booming. You could probably find something here within a few weeks." "I'm not looking for just any job," I replied. "I need to figure out how to carry forward what Elaine started. Robert is going to dismantle everything that made Horizon special." There was a pause on the line. "That's a big undertaking, Meg. You've got what? A couple $100 to your name right now?" $197.42 is to be exact, I confirmed, looking at the check on my kitchen counter. "But I also have Elaine's playbook, 5 years of industry connections, and nothing left to lose." 3 days later, I loaded my Honda with whatever would fit and made the 23-hour drive from San Francisco to Austin. I left behind my furnished apartment, forfeiting my security deposit, most of my wardrobe, and the comfortable life I'd built. What I took with me was far more valuable: Elaine's notebook, my determination, and a growing seed of an idea. The tech landscape had shifted since Horizon launched. New platforms and technologies had emerged, creating gaps in the SI market that larger, slower-moving companies hadn't yet recognized. Elaine had been planning a new direction for Horizon before her illness, a complementary service that would extend their platform's capabilities into emerging spaces. She had outlined it in our strategy sessions, but Robert had dismissed it as speculative and unfocused. Now I wondered if he had recognized its potential and wanted to keep it for himself. My first week in Austin, I took stock of my assets, $197.42 from the severance check, approximately $3,000 in savings that would rapidly disappear, covering my basic expenses, my laptop, and my skills. I needed to generate income immediately. while working toward the larger vision. The freelance market for presentation design is pretty decent, Zoe suggested over dinner my second night. You always created killer decks at Horizon. You could start there while networking and developing. Your bigger idea. She was right. By the end of the week, I had set up profiles on several freelance platforms offering presentation design, business plan development, and pitch coaching, all skills I'd honed at Horizon. I used $150 of my severance money to subscribe to Essential, design software and business tools, leaving me with less than $50 in cash. My first client was a local food delivery startup preparing for a seed funding round. They needed a compelling pitch deck, but had minimal budget. I agreed to a reduced rate in exchange for introductions to local angel investors. The project consumed 3 days of intense work, but the result was a presentation that translated their operational complexity into a clear, compelling investment story. They secured $300,000 in funding. Word spread quickly in Austin's close-knit startup community, and within 2 weeks, I had more freelance work than I could handle. By the end of the first month, I had earned back my initial investment 5 times over. But freelancing was just the foundation. During every spare moment, I was working on what I called the Revival Project, my plan to resurrect Elaine's vision in a new form. I carefully reviewed her notes, identifying the core innovations that made her approach special, and researching how those elements could be adapted to the current market. One evening, while helping a client troubleshoot their customer engagement strategy, I had a breakthrough. Horizon's platform excelled at helping businesses manage customer relationships, but what many smaller companies really needed was help identifying and reaching potential customers in the first place. The acquisition costs for small businesses were prohibitively high, with major corporations dominating digital marketing channels through sheer spending power. What if I could create a cooperative customer acquisition platform, one that allowed smaller businesses to pool resources, share non-competing customers, and collectively compete against larger players? It would be the perfect complement to Horizon's existing tools, filling the gap that Elaine had identified before her illness. That night, I stayed up until 4 a.m. drafting the initial concept. By morning, I had the bones of a business plan and a name, Collective Edge. The platform would use collaborative data insights and shared marketing resources to dramatically lower customer acquisition costs for member businesses. It was exactly the kind of democratizing tool Elaine had always envisioned, leveling the playing field for smaller players through smart technology and collaboration. But ideas, no matter how promising, require resources to become reality. I needed seed funding, technical talent, and industry partners willing to pilot the concept. Most importantly, I needed to understand exactly what was happening at Horizon under Robert's leadership to ensure Collective Edge would truly complement their existing platform rather than duplicate what they might already be developing. 2. Months into my time in Austin, an unexpected opportunity arose. A former Horizon client reached out through LinkedIn, unaware that I no longer worked there. They were frustrated with recent changes to the platform that had made it less accessible for smaller businesses, exactly the constituency Elaine had been committed to serving. The new pricing structure is clearly designed to push smaller accounts toward enterprise packages we don't need, the client explained during our call. It feels like they're deliberately trying to shed smaller customers. This confirmed my suspicions. Robert was repositioning Horizon to focus exclusively on enterprise clients, more profitable in the short term but completely counter to Elaine's vision of democratizing access to powerful customer experience tools. What if there was an alternative? I asked carefully. A platform specifically designed for businesses your size, focused on the most pressing challenge, customer acquisition. Costs? I'd switch in a heartbeat, they replied without hesitation, and I know at least a dozen other former Horizon clients who would too. That conversation became the first of many. I systematically reached out to smaller Horizon clients, positioning myself as an independent consultant researching market needs. The pattern was consistent. Robert was alienating Horizon's smaller clients through pricing changes, reduced support, and elimination of features they relied on. He was creating a vacuum in the market, and I was increasingly convinced that Collective Edge could fill it. By the end of my third month in Austin, I had compiled enough market research to validate the concept and refined the business plan based on direct feedback from potential users. What I lacked was technical co-founders to help build the platform and seed funding to support development. Zoe introduced me to her network at the tech incubator, including a brilliant software engineer named Marcus Wong, who had recently left a major tech company after becoming disillusioned with their relentless focus on monetization over user value. "Your concept reminds me of why I got into tech in the first place," Marcus said after I walked him through the Collective Edge model. "Building tools that actually help the underdog instead of just extracting more data and dollars from users." "That's exactly what Elaine believed," I replied. "Technology should democratize opportunity, not concentrate it." Marcus introduced me to Imani Jefferson, a data scientist with expertise in collaborative filtering systems, precisely the technology we would need to make the shared customer acquisition model work. After several intense discussions about both, the technical architecture and the business philosophy behind Collective Edge, they agreed to come on board as co-founders. With a founding team in place, we created a detailed prototype and financial projections. The next challenge was securing enough funding to build a minimum viable product and support initial operations. Traditional venture capital seemed unlikely. We had no revenue, no users, and a founding team with impressive skills but limited entrepreneurial track records. Instead, we focused on angel investors, particularly those who had supported female founders and mission-driven companies. We identified 20 potential investors who aligned with our values and prepared personalized pitches for each one. Our first 5 pitches resulted in polite rejections. The 6th meeting, with a former tech executive turned angel investor named Grace Kim, changed everything. "I knew Elaine Foster," Grace said midway through our presentation. "We were in the same mentorship program for women in tech about 8 years ago. Brilliant woman, completely authentic. You're carrying forward her approach, aren't you?" I nodded, surprised and moved by the connection. She was my mentor. This platform reflects her belief that technology should create more opportunities, not fewer. Grace studied me carefully. "And what happens if this succeeds beyond your expectations? Would you sell to the highest bidder? Perhaps even to Horizon if they came with the right price?" "No," I said without hesitation. "The purpose of Collective Edge is to ensure smaller businesses always have access to powerful customer acquisition tools, regardless of market consolidation. If we sold to a company that didn't share that commitment, we'd be betraying our founding purpose." She smiled slightly. That's what Elaine would have said. She closed her laptop. "I'll invest $250,000 as a convertible note. And I'll introduce you to 3 other angels who I believe will appreciate both the business opportunity and the mission behind it." Within 2 weeks, we had secured $800,000 in initial funding, enough to build our minimum viable product and support a small team for approximately 10 months. We set up operations in a cramped co-working space in East Austin and began the intense process of building the Collective Edge platform. The development phase was grueling. We worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, fueled by a combination of determination and the knowledge that our runway was limited. Marcus led the technical architecture, Imani designed the collaborative filtering algorithms, and I focused on product requirements, user experience, and building our initial client pipeline. 4 months later, we had a functioning beta version, ready for testing. We invited 12 former Horizon clients who had expressed interest during my research phase to become our founding members. 10 accepted immediately. The initial results exceeded even our optimistic projections. Within the first month of beta testing, our member businesses reported a 47% average reduction in customer acquisition costs and a 31% increase in new customer conversion rates. The collaborative model was working. By sharing anonymized data and pooling marketing resources, these smaller businesses were achieving efficiencies previously available only to major corporations. Word spread quickly. By the end of the second month, we had a waiting list of over 50 businesses eager to join the platform once we moved beyond beta. We carefully documented everything: the performance metrics, user testimonials, and iteration process, knowing that our next funding round would depend on demonstrating both traction and potential. 6 months after receiving our initial funding, we officially launched Collective Edge to the public with 40 founding member businesses. TechCrunch covered our launch with the headline, "Collective Edge empowers small businesses with collaborative customer acquisition platform." The article mentioned my history with Horizon Innovations and positioned Collective Edge as carrying forward the democratizing vision of late Horizon founder Elaine Foster, now seemingly abandoned by the company under new leadership. It was the first public connection between my new venture and my history with Horizon, and I knew it would likely catch Robert's attention. I wasn't prepared for just how quickly that would happen. The day after the article published, I received an email from Horizon's legal department alleging that Collective Edge potentially infringed on proprietary concepts developed during my employment. It was a transparent intimidation tactic. There was no actual legal basis for their claim, but it confirmed that we had hit a nerve. They wouldn't bother if they didn't see us as a threat, Marcus observed when I shared the email with the founding team. This is actually good news. He was right. The cease and desist letter, which our lawyers easily refuted, became a rallying point. Our waitlist doubled in the weeks following the legal threat, as more former Horizon clients learned about Collective Edge, through industry chatter around the attempted intimidation. As Collective Edge gained momentum, we secured a Series A funding round of $2 million led by a venture capital firm specializing in disruptive B2B platforms. This allowed us to expand our team, enhance the platform's capabilities, and develop additional features specifically requested by our growing user base. By our first anniversary, Collective Edge had over 300 member businesses, consistent month-over-month growth, and a clear path to profitability. We had moved into proper offices, expanded to 28 employees, and begun to receive acquisition interest from larger tech companies, offers we politely declined, staying true to our commitment to independence. Throughout this period, I kept tabs on Horizon's trajectory under Robert's leadership. As predicted, he had pivoted the company hard toward enterprise clients, raising prices substantially and eliminating most of the features designed for smaller businesses. The strategy showed initial financial success. Their quarterly earnings improved and the stock price rose, but reports of customer churn and employee turnover suggested underlying problems. 14 months after my unceremonious dismissal from Horizon, I received a LinkedIn message from their current VP of Product Strategy, a recent hire brought in by Robert. "I'd like to discuss potential collaboration opportunities between our companies. Your platform has captured significant attention in spaces adjacent to our core business." I recognized the corporate euphemism for what it really was. Horizon was losing valuable market share to Collective Edge as more mid-sized customers abandoned their increasingly enterprise-focused platform. Now they wanted to explore either acquiring us or partnering to stem the tide. After consulting with my co-founders and our board, I agreed to a preliminary meeting. Not because we had any interest in selling to Horizon, but because the meeting would provide valuable intelligence about their current strategy and pain points. Information that could help us better position Collective Edge to continue serving customers abandoned by Horizon's pivot. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Horizon's San Francisco headquarters, my first time returning since being escorted out 16 months earlier. As the date approached, I received another surprising message, this one directly from Robert Hayes himself. "Megan, I understand you'll be meeting with our product team next week. I'd like to speak with you privately before that meeting. There are matters relating to Elaine's legacy at Horizon that I believe we should discuss directly." The message confirmed what I had long suspected. Robert was feeling the pressure as Collective Edge gained traction with former Horizon clients. The mention of Elaine was particularly telling. He was trying to establish common ground by invoking my former mentor. I replied agreeing to meet him directly, suggesting his office as the location. There was poetic justice in the idea of returning to the very building where I'd been dismissed, with nothing but $200 to my name, now as the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing competitor. As my flight touched down in San Francisco the following Monday, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also gratitude for the journey that had led me here. What had seemed like catastrophe 16 months ago had actually been the catalyst for building something more aligned with Elaine's vision than would have been possible within Horizon under Robert's leadership. I checked into my hotel, laid out my outfit for the following day, a professional but confidence-projecting blue suit, and reviewed my notes one final time. Whatever Robert wanted to discuss, I needed to remain focused on our mission at Collective Edge, empowering smaller businesses to compete effectively in an increasingly consolidated marketplace. The next morning, I took a rideshare to the familiar Horizon building in South Park. As I approached the entrance, I noticed my reflection in the glass doors, no longer the shell-shocked former employee clutching a box of belongings, but a successful founder who had turned adversity into opportunity. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked through the doors, ready to meet Robert Hayes from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. The journey that had begun with just $197, $42, and a determination to honor Elaine's vision had come full circle, proving that sometimes losing everything is the first step to building something better. The receptionist did a double-take as I approached the front desk, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Ms. Carter, is that you?" "Hello, Denise," I replied, smiling warmly at the familiar face. "It's good to see you again." She seemed genuinely pleased to see me, which was touching. I'd always made a point of learning the names of everyone at Horizon, from the custodial staff to the board members, a practice Elaine had instilled in me. "Mr. Hayes is expecting you. Should I let him know you're here?" "Please do," I said, glancing around the lobby. It had changed subtly since my departure. The vibrant community wall showcasing customer success stories had been replaced with sleek corporate messaging. Even the company's mission statement displayed above the reception desk had been altered, with Elaine's original words about democratizing success now absent. While waiting, I checked my phone to find a message from Marcus. "Closed 2 more. Enterprise clients this morning. We're now at 327 active members, 42% growth quarter over quarter. Crush this meeting." The message bolstered my confidence. I wasn't here as a supplicant or a nostalgic former employee. I was here as the CEO of a thriving competitor that was increasingly eating into Horizon's market share. "He'll see you now," Denise said, gesturing toward the elevator. 15th floor. His assistant will meet you." The executive floor had undergone a complete transformation. Gone were the collaborative spaces and transparent glass offices that Elaine had designed to foster open communication. In their place stood imposing wooden doors and formal waiting, areas that created hierarchical distance. The change perfectly symbolized how Robert had remade the company in his image: prestigious, traditional, and focused on projected authority rather than genuine innovation. Robert's assistant, a young man I didn't recognize, led me to an impressive corner office with sweeping views of the bay. Robert rose from behind an enormous desk as I entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Megan," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet ahead of tomorrow's discussions." I shook his hand firmly. "Robert, your office has quite the view now." "Yes. Well, certain adjustments were necessary as the company evolved," he replied, gesturing toward a seating area near the windows. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be fine," I said, taking a seat on the sleek leather couch. As he instructed his assistant to bring refreshments, I took the moment to observe him more closely. Robert looked both more polished and more strained than I remembered. His designer suit was impeccable, but new lines had formed around his eyes, and a tension in his shoulders suggested the pressure of leadership wasn't sitting as comfortably as he had anticipated. "You've been quite busy since leaving Horizon," he began, settling into an armchair across from me. "Collective Edge has made quite a splash in the small business market. We've found there's significant demand for collaborative customer acquisition tools, particularly among businesses that feel abandoned by their previous solutions providers," I replied, maintaining steady eye contact. He acknowledged the jab with a slight tightening of his jaw. "Market segmentation is a natural part of company evolution, Megan. Enterprise clients represent the most sustainable growth path for a company of Horizon's scale." "That's one perspective," I said. Elaine believed differently. At the mention of her name, something flickered across his face. Discomfort, perhaps even guilt. Elaine was a visionary in many ways, but her attachment to smaller clients was ultimately sentimental rather than strategic. "The board has been very pleased with our recalibration toward enterprise solutions. I'm sure the quarterly numbers look impressive," I conceded. "But at what cost to the company's original mission and long-term market position?" Robert leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Let's be direct, Megan. You've built something impressive with the resources available to you. Collective Edge clearly addresses a market need. But you must recognize the limitations of your current position. Limited capital, a narrow technological focus, vulnerability to larger competitors entering your space." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting Horizon is planning to reclaim the small business market it deliberately abandoned?" "I'm suggesting that there might be mutual benefit in exploring a more collaborative relationship between our companies," he replied carefully. "Potentially even an acquisition that would bring Collective Edge's innovations under the Horizon umbrella, while providing you and your team with the resources to scale more effectively." And there it was, the real purpose of this meeting. Robert wasn't interested in reconciliation or acknowledging his strategic missteps. He wanted to acquire Collective Edge to patch the hole in Horizon's market coverage that his own decisions had created. "Interesting proposition," I said neutrally. "What value would you place on such an acquisition?" He named a figure that was substantial, 8 times our current annual revenue, but still significantly undervalued our growth trajectory and strategic position. "That's a starting point for discussion," I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting the offer. Of course, any such conversation would need to address questions of operational autonomy, leadership continuity, and commitment to our existing customer base. Robert nodded, seemingly encouraged by my willingness to engage with the concept. "All negotiable points. The key question is whether you're open to bringing Collective Edge back into the fold, so to speak, to reuniting Elaine's legacy under one roof." His invocation of Elaine's name as a persuasive tactic struck me as particularly manipulative, given how thoroughly he had dismantled her vision after her death. "Elaine's legacy isn't a building or a corporate structure, Robert," I said quietly. "It's an approach to business that puts democratization of opportunity at the center. Any discussion about Collective Edge's future would have to start with ironclad commitments to that principle." Our conversation continued for nearly an hour, circling around the potential structure of an acquisition without reaching any concrete agreements. I was careful to neither reject his overtures nor show too much enthusiasm, maintaining a position of professional consideration while gathering valuable intelligence about Horizon's current challenges. As our meeting concluded, Robert walked me toward the door. "I hope you'll give serious thought to what we've discussed. The official meeting tomorrow with our product team will focus on potential technical integrations, but the broader strategic questions are between you and me." "I appreciate your directness," I replied. "We'll certainly give any formal offer thorough consideration." As I turned to leave, he added, "You know, Despite our professional differences, I've always respected your capabilities, Megan. What you've built with Collective Edge in such a short time is remarkable. Perhaps your departure from Horizon, while unfortunate in its timing, was ultimately beneficial for all involved. I paused, considering his statement. It was as close to an admission as I was likely to get that he recognized the value I brought to Horizon and the success I'd achieved since being forced out. Perhaps it was, I agreed. Sometimes the best path forward isn't obvious until circumstances force you to find it. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I reflected on the surreal nature of the interaction. 16 months ago, Robert had dismissed me with minimal severance and maximum condescension. Now, he was offering millions to acquire the company. I'd built from the ashes of that dismissal. If I'd needed validation that Collective Edge was on the right track, this meeting had provided it in abundance. Outside the building, I called Marcus and Imani, putting them on speaker as I walked toward the nearby South Park to find a quiet bench. "So?" Marcus asked eagerly. "Did he beg you to come back?" "Not in so many words," I replied. "But he did offer to acquire us for $27 million. There was a moment of stunned silence before Imani spoke. "That's significantly below our projected valuation if we continue on our current growth trajectory." "Exactly," I agreed. "It's a lowball offer, designed to seem generous while actually undervaluing our position and potential. But the fact that he's making any offer at all confirms what we've suspected. Horizon is feeling the pressure from the clients they've lost to us." "What's our next move?" Marcus asked. "We proceed with tomorrow's meeting with their product." "Team as planned," I said. "We gather as much intelligence as possible about their technical roadmap and pain points. Then we take that information back to Austin and use it to refine our strategy for the next phase of growth." "And the acquisition offer?" Imani pressed. "We neither accept nor formally reject it," I explained. "We express appropriate interest, request comprehensive due diligence materials, and use the process to gain even deeper insights into their operations and client base, information that will be valuable whether we ever seriously consider their offer or not." "Brilliant," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Using their own acquisition process as competitive intelligence gathering." "Elaine would be proud," Imani added quietly. "You've not only built something meaningful from nearly nothing, but you're outmaneuvering the very people who thought you were dispensable." Her words touched me deeply. Throughout this entire journey, honoring Elaine's approach to business had been my North Star. Even now, facing a potential windfall that could set me up for life, I measured my decisions against what she would have done in my position. After ending the call, I sat in South Park for a while, watching tech workers hurry past during their lunch breaks. 16 months ago, I had been one of them, secure in my position, confident in my future path, unaware of how quickly everything could change. Now I understood the fragility of that security and the strength that comes from building something on your own terms. That evening, I had dinner with Grace Kim, our first angel investor, who had become both a trusted advisor and a friend. "So Robert wants to buy Collective Edge," she summarized after I recounted the meeting. "Can't say I'm surprised. Your growth metrics are impressive, and you're capturing exactly the market segment they abandoned. The question is whether there's any acquisition structure that would allow us to maintain our mission," I said, pushing my plate aside. "I'm not categorically opposed to an exit if it would secure and expand what we're building, but I'm skeptical that Horizon under Robert's leadership is the right home." Grace studied me thoughtfully. "What do you really want, Megan? Not just for Collective Edge, but for yourself?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on building the business and proving Robert wrong that I hadn't spent much time considering my personal endgame. "I want to create lasting impact," I said after a moment's reflection. "I want to build tools that genuinely help smaller businesses compete and thrive. And I want to vindicate Elaine's belief in me, to show that her mentorship wasn't wasted. And does selling to Horizon accomplish those goals? Grace pressed. I shook my head slowly. Probably not. Even with contractual protections, the mission would likely be compromised over time. And it would feel like letting Robert win after all, Grace finished for me. That sounds petty when you put it that way, I admitted. It's not petty to recognize when a potential business decision is being influenced by personal history, she replied. The key is to acknowledge those feelings, then set them aside to make the decision based on what's best for your company, your team, and your customers. I nodded, appreciating her clarity. Tomorrow's meeting with their product team should give us more context for evaluating any formal offer. The meeting the next morning was enlightening, though not in the way Horizon's team likely intended. Their product leaders were clearly under instruction to explore integration possibilities while gathering intelligence about Collective Edge's technology. I played along, sharing only information that was already publicly available while asking probing questions that revealed significant gaps in their understanding of the small and mid-sized business market. Most tellingly, when I asked about their plans to address the needs of businesses that couldn't afford their new enterprise pricing structure, their answers were vague and inconsistent, confirming my suspicion that Robert had no real strategy. For the market segment they had abandoned, only a belated recognition that allowing Collective Edge to capture it entirely was a strategic error. After the meeting, Robert's assistant informed me that he was in back-to-back meetings, but had asked to be notified when our discussion concluded. I left a brief note thanking him for his time and stating that I would be in touch after consulting with my team and board regarding next steps. On the flight back to Austin, I drafted a detailed memo analyzing everything I had learned during the San Francisco meetings. The picture it painted was clear. Horizon, under Robert's leadership, had achieved short-term financial gains at the expense of long-term market position. Their pivot to enterprise clients had delivered immediate revenue increases, but created substantial vulnerabilities in their business model, vulnerabilities that Collective Edge was perfectly positioned to exploit. When I landed, Marcus and Imani were waiting at baggage claim, eager for a first-hand account. We continued our discussion during the drive back to our office, where the rest of the team had gathered for an impromptu strategy session. Based on everything I observed, I concluded after sharing my findings, Horizon is feeling significant pressure from both directions. Enterprise clients are demanding more customization and integration than they anticipated, while the exodus of smaller clients to platforms like ours is happening faster than they projected. So, what's our move? Asked Priya Sharma, our head of customer success. Do we seriously consider their acquisition offer? I looked around the room at the team we had built, talented, passionate people who believed in our mission of democratizing customer acquisition tools. They deserved a voice in this decision. I want to hear from all of you, I said. This isn't just my company. We've built it together, and any decision about its future should reflect our collective wisdom. The discussion that followed was one of the most meaningful of my professional life. Team members shared their perspectives on our growth trajectory, the competitive landscape, and our mission. Some saw strategic value in joining forces with a larger platform, while others expressed concern about maintaining our culture and commitment to smaller businesses. After nearly 3 hours of dialogue, a consensus emerged. We would continue on our independent path, focusing on rapid growth and innovation. Rather than selling to Horizon, we would use Robert's interest as validation of our approach and leverage it to attract additional investment on more favorable terms. The next morning, I called Robert to deliver our decision. After careful consideration and consultation with my team and board, we've decided that remaining independent best serves our mission and our customers at this time, I explained. While we appreciate Horizon's interest, we believe Collective Edge is positioned for significant independent growth. There was a moment of silence before he responded. I understand, though I think you're missing an opportunity for synergy. That would benefit both companies. Would you be open to revisiting this conversation in the future if circumstances change? We're always open to discussions that could advance our mission, I replied diplomatically. For now, we're focused on our growth trajectory and product roadmap. After ending the call, I felt a profound sense of clarity and purpose. We had taken the harder path, building something from scratch rather than accepting the easier route of acquisition, but it was the right decision for our team, our customers, and our vision. The months that followed validated that choice. Collective Edge continued its rapid expansion, surpassing 500 member businesses within 6 months of declining Horizon's offer. We secured a Series B funding round of $12 million at a valuation nearly triple what Robert had offered, allowing us to accelerate product development and expand into international markets. Meanwhile, Horizon faced increasing challenges. Their quarterly earnings began to miss projections as enterprise client acquisition proved costlier than anticipated, and customer churn remained higher than expected. Industry analysts started questioning Robert's strategy, with one prominent report explicitly citing the loss of small and mid-sized business market share to nimble competitors like Collective Edge as a key vulnerability. 10 months after our meeting in San Francisco, I received another message from Robert, this one noticeably less confident in tone. I believe it would be beneficial to revisit our previous conversations about potential collaboration. Horizon's board has expressed interest in exploring more substantial partnerships than previously discussed. Translation: they were now willing to offer significantly more to acquire Collective Edge, and the board was putting pressure on Robert to solve the growing competitive threat we represented. I shared the message with Marcus, Imani, and our board. He's under pressure, Marcus observed. This is no longer about quietly absorbing a small competitor. It's about addressing a strategic threat that's affecting their market position and stock price. Which means we now have substantially more leverage than when he first approached us, Imani added. Our board chair, a veteran tech executive named Michael Chen, leaned forward. The question isn't whether they want to acquire us anymore. It's whether there's any scenario in which an acquisition makes sense for our mission and our stakeholders. I considered this carefully. What if we reversed the dynamic? Rather than allowing ourselves to be acquired by the current Horizon leadership, what if we positioned ourselves to influence or even reshape Horizon's direction? You mean like a reverse takeover? Michael asked, intrigued. That would require substantially more capital than we currently have access to. Not necessarily a literal takeover, I clarified. But what if we made any acquisition contingent on structural changes at Horizon that would realign the company with Elaine's original vision? Leadership changes, board representation, explicit commitments to the small and mid-sized business market. A strategic smile spread across Michael's face. You're suggesting we use their interest in acquiring us as leverage to essentially reform Horizon from within. Ambitious, but not impossible given their current vulnerabilities. It would be poetic justice, Marcus said. Using the success you built from being kicked out to fundamentally change the company that dismissed you. I nodded slowly. More importantly, it might be the most effective way to fully realize Elaine's vision, combining Horizon's scale and resources with our focus on democratizing access. Over the next week, we developed a detailed response strategy. Rather than immediately rejecting or embracing Robert's renewed overture, we would engage in a careful negotiation designed to test how far Horizon's board might go to address the competitive threat we posed. I crafted a response that was professional, but firm. We're open to discussions about strategic partnerships or deeper integration, but any such conversation would need to begin with alignment on fundamental business philosophy and market approach. Our commitment to democratizing customer acquisition tools for businesses of all sizes is non-negotiable. Robert's reply came quickly. I believe there's more common ground than our previous discussions might have suggested. Horizon's board has been reevaluating our market segmentation strategy and sees significant value in your approach to the small, and mid-sized business sector. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss how our combined resources could advance shared goals. The shift in tone was revealing. Gone was the condescending assumption that I should be grateful for their interest. In its place was something approaching professional respect, perhaps even a recognition that Collective Edge had built something truly valuable. I agreed to another meeting, this time suggesting neutral territory, a conference room at a downtown Austin hotel, rather than either company's offices. The location choice was both practical, given Horizon's need to send several executives, and symbolic. We would meet as equals, not as a dominant company and its smaller target. As I prepared for this pivotal negotiation, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this point. 16 months ago, I had left San Francisco with $197, $42 and a determination to honor Elaine's vision. Now I was returning to the negotiating table with the leverage to potentially reshape the very company that had once dismissed me as expendable. The path hadn't been easy. There had been countless nights of doubt, financial stress, and the relentless pressure of building something from almost nothing. But those challenges had forged a resilience and clarity that I might never have developed in the comfortable confines of my previous role. Sometimes being forced to start over with barely enough to survive isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a much better one. Robert's dismissal, intended to sideline me, had instead catalyzed the creation of something that now threatened his own position and legacy. The $200 severance check that was meant to be a final insult had become the seed money for my greatest professional achievement. As I reviewed our negotiation strategy one final time, I smiled at the irony. I wasn't going into this meeting seeking revenge or even validation. I was pursuing something far more meaningful. The opportunity to fully realize the vision that Elaine had entrusted to me, potentially at a scale beyond what Collective Edge could achieve alone. The true vindication wasn't in making Robert regret his decision, though that would be a satisfying side effect. It was in proving that Elaine had been right all along, both about the business model she had pioneered and about the potential she had seen in me. With that clarity of purpose, I closed my laptop and prepared to meet the Horizon delegation. Whatever the outcome of tomorrow's negotiations, I had already succeeded in the most important way, transforming a moment of professional devastation into the catalyst for building something truly meaningful. That journey from 197.42 to a DC position of strategic influence was a testament not just to perseverance, but to the power of staying true to your values even when the easier path beckons. The hotel conference room hummed with tension as I arrived 15 minutes early to center myself before the Horizon delegation appeared. I had deliberately chosen this neutral space, the sleek meeting room at the Four Seasons Austin, to level the playing field. No home court advantage for either side. I arranged my materials precisely, placing my laptop, notebook, and a small framed photo on the polished table. The photo showed Elaine and me at a company retreat 3 years earlier, both of us laughing as we posed beside a whiteboard covered in ambitious plans for Horizon's future. It wasn't there for negotiation leverage, but as a personal reminder of why this meeting mattered beyond business metrics and acquisition figures. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the door opened to admit Robert Hayes, flanked by Horizon's CFO Patricia Winters and their head of corporate development, Jason Takahashi. Following them was an older man I recognized immediately, despite never having met. Him in person, Lawrence Bennett, Horizon's board chairman and a legendary figure in enterprise software. His presence was significant. Board chairs rarely attended preliminary acquisition discussions unless the stakes were extraordinarily high or the situation particularly delicate. That he had flown to Austin personally spoke volumes about how seriously Horizon was taking this negotiation. "Ms. Carter," Bennett said, stepping forward to shake my hand while the others were still settling their belongings. "A pleasure to finally meet you. Your reputation precedes you." "Likewise, Mr. Bennett," I replied, maintaining steady eye contact. "Thank you for making the trip." Robert watched this exchange with barely concealed discomfort. The dynamic had shifted dramatically from our last meeting, Bennett's presence effectively signaling that this was no longer Robert's negotiation to control. "I've been following Collective Edge's progress with interest," Bennett continued as we all took seats. "Remarkable growth trajectory, particularly in sectors where Horizon has historically struggled to maintain traction. Small and mid-sized businesses require specialized approaches," I agreed. "Understanding their needs has been our focus from day one." Bennett nodded thoughtfully. A segment Elaine Foster was always particularly passionate about, as I recall. The mention of Elaine's name coming from Bennett, rather than being used manipulatively by Robert, felt different, more respectful of her legacy. I glanced briefly at the photo on the table before responding. "Elaine believed that powerful technology shouldn't be reserved for those with enterprise budgets," I said. "That principle guides everything we do at Collective Edge." Robert cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the practical aspects of potential integration. Our teams have prepared some preliminary models for how Collective Edge's technology could complement Horizon's enterprise platform." "Before we explore integration scenarios," I interjected calmly, "I think it's important to address the philosophical alignment between our companies. Collective Edge exists specifically because Horizon pivoted away from serving smaller businesses. Any partnership discussion needs to begin with clarity about market strategy and commitment." Patricia Winters, Horizon's CFO, frowned slightly. "With respect, Ms. Carter, business philosophy doesn't appear on balance sheets. We're here to discuss a transaction that could create substantial value for both companies' stakeholders." "On the contrary," Bennett said before I could respond, surprising everyone in the room. "Ms. Carter's point is entirely valid. Failed acquisitions almost always stem from misalignment of vision and values, not financial terms." He turned to me with an evaluative gaze. "You're concerned that Collective Edge's mission would be diluted or abandoned after acquisition?" It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Our team has built something remarkable precisely because we're committed to democratizing access to sophisticated customer acquisition tools. That mission isn't negotiable." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Market priorities evolve based on leadership decisions," Bennett interrupted, his tone remaining pleasant but firm. "Which brings us to an important question, Ms. Carter. What exactly would you require to consider bringing Collective Edge under the Horizon umbrella?" This was the opening I had been waiting for, a direct invitation to outline terms from the person with actual authority to implement them. I took a measured breath before responding. "3 non-negotiable conditions," I said, maintaining calm professionalism despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "First, Collective Edge would maintain operational autonomy as a division specifically focused on small and mid-sized businesses, with guaranteed resource allocation that couldn't be redirected to enterprise initiatives." Bennett nodded, gesturing for me to continue. "Second, our founding team would need to be integrated into Horizon's senior leadership, with explicit authority over product decisions affecting our user base." Robert's expression tightened, but he remained silent as Bennett continued listening attentively. "And third," I continued, meeting the chairman's gaze directly, "Horizon would need to formally recommit to Elaine Foster's founding vision through concrete actions, reinstating accessibility features for smaller clients, revising pricing structures that have excluded them, and establishing an innovation fund specifically dedicated to developing technologies that benefit businesses regardless of size." A heavy silence fell over the room. My terms weren't just about protecting Collective Edge. They represented a fundamental challenge to the strategic direction Robert had pursued since taking control. After a long moment, Bennett leaned back in his chair. "Bold conditions, Ms. Carter. Some might say you're effectively asking for a strategic reversal of Horizon's current trajectory." "I'm asking for a course correction," I clarified, one that combines Horizon's enterprise expertise with Collective Edge's innovation in the small business sector, a restoration of balance rather than an either-or proposition. Bennett's expression remained unreadable, but I noticed a subtle shift in his posture, a slight lean forward that suggested engagement rather than dismissal. "May I ask a personal question?" he said unexpectedly. I nodded, curious. "When you were forced out of Horizon, you could have pursued countless opportunities with your credentials and experience. Instead, you built Collective Edge with minimal resources. Why?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. I glanced at Robert, whose discomfort was now plainly visible, before answering truthfully. "Because I believed Elaine was right," I said simply. "Not just about business strategy, but about purpose. Technology can either concentrate power or distribute it. She built Horizon to do the latter, and when that mission was abandoned, someone needed to carry it forward." A ghost of a smile crossed Bennett's face. "Even if that meant starting with just a couple $100 and an uncertain future?" I met his gaze steadily. "Sometimes the size of your resources matters less than the clarity of your purpose." Bennett nodded, slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Interesting." He turned to his colleagues. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Carter privately for a few minutes." The request clearly surprised Robert, who opened his mouth as if to object before thinking better of it. "Of course," he managed, rising stiffly. "We'll wait in the hotel lobby." Once the door closed behind them, Bennett's formal demeanor relaxed slightly. "I knew Elaine quite well," he said, his tone more conversational. "We served on a non-profit board together years ago, before Horizon was more than an idea in her apartment. Remarkable woman, brilliant but never arrogant, ambitious but never at others' expense." "That aligns with my experience of her," I agreed, wondering where this was heading. "When she recruited me to Horizon's board after their Series B, she specifically mentioned wanting governance that would maintain the company's founding principles through growth and eventually succession," he continued. "A safeguard against the common pattern of mission drift as companies scale." He paused, studying me thoughtfully. "I've failed in that responsibility." The candid admission stunned me. Bennett was acknowledging that he had allowed exactly the kind of mission divergence Elaine had sought to prevent. "The quarterly pressures of public markets can be seductive," he continued. "Short-term gains that look impressive on earnings calls, but obscure longer-term vulnerabilities." I allowed Robert's pivot to enterprise clients to proceed without sufficient consideration of its implications for Horizon's foundational purpose. "It's not too late to rebalance," I offered. He nodded. "Which brings me to a proposition distinctly different from what was initially discussed." He leaned forward. "What if, instead of Horizon acquiring Collective Edge, we explore a leadership merger? You would join Horizon as President and Chief Innovation Officer, with authority to rebuild the small and mid-sized business division around Collective Edge's platform, while Robert would retain CEO title but focus exclusively on enterprise sector growth." I blinked, processing the unexpected proposal. "That's not what I anticipated." "Horizon's board has been increasingly concerned about our vulnerability in the small business sector," Bennett explained. "Your success with Collective Edge has thrown that vulnerability into sharp relief. Rather than simply acquiring your technology, we need your leadership and vision." "And Robert? I assume he's not enthusiastic about sharing authority." Bennett's expression turned pragmatic. "Robert will understand the business necessity, particularly when the alternative might be more dramatic leadership changes if our market position continues to erode." The implication was clear. Robert's position wasn't as secure as he likely believed, and Bennett was offering me a path to implement my vision from within Horizon, rather than continuing to battle from outside. "I'd need guarantees beyond titles," I said, mind racing to process this unexpected turn. board representation, budgetary authority, explicit change mandates. All negotiable, Bennett agreed. The key question is whether you believe this approach could better serve your ultimate goal than continuing to build collective edge independently. It was a profound question that cut to the heart of my motivations. Was this journey ultimately about proving myself by building something separate, or about most effectively advancing Elaine's vision of democratizing access to powerful business tools? I would need to consult with my team, I said finally. They've been essential partners in building collective edge. Any arrangement would need to include appropriate roles for them. Of course, Bennett nodded. Take whatever time you need. This isn't a decision to rush. As he moved to recall the others, I stopped him with a question. Why now? Collective Edge is successful but still relatively small compared to Horizon. What's really driving this? Bennett considered me for a long moment before answering. You know what Elaine told me when I asked why she had made you her chief of staff despite your relative youth? She said, Lawrence, some people need decades to develop wisdom. Others have an intuitive understanding of what matters from the start. Megan is the latter. He smiled slightly. Recent events suggest she was right. The others returned, and the meeting concluded with agreement to continue discussions following consultation with our respective teams. As we shook hands at the door, Bennett held mine a moment longer. Whatever you decide, Ms. Carter, you've already validated Elaine's faith in you. Remember that. The ride back to Collective Edge headquarters was a blur of racing thoughts and conflicting emotions. Bennett's proposition represented an opportunity I hadn't dared imagine. The chance to reform Horizon from within, to reclaim Elaine's vision at the scale only Horizon's resources could provide. But it also presented complications and risks that required careful consideration. Marcus, Imani, and our senior leadership team were waiting anxiously in our conference room, eager to hear the outcome of the meeting. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to concern as I entered. So, did they offer more money? Marcus asked immediately. They offered something unexpected, I replied, setting down my bag and taking a deep breath before explaining Bennett's proposition in detail. The room erupted in a cacophony of reactions: surprise, skepticism, cautious optimism, and pointed questions about what this would mean for Collective Edge's team and technology. Let's take this step by step, I said, raising my hands to restore order. This isn't a decision I would make unilaterally. It affects all of us and the mission we've built together. Over the next 3 hours, we dissected every aspect of the proposal, the opportunities it presented, the risks it entailed, and the safeguards we would need to protect both our team members and our vision. The discussion was passionate, but thoughtful, each person bringing their unique perspective to this crucial inflection point. What happens to Collective Edge if we do this? Priya asked, voicing a concern that several had expressed. Does it become just another acquisition that gets gradually absorbed and diluted? That's a crucial question, I acknowledged. Any agreement would need to clearly establish Collective Edge as the foundation of Horizon's renewed commitment to smaller businesses, not just another feature set to be integrated and potentially de-emphasized later. And what about Robert? Marcus pressed. Can you really work alongside someone who kicked you out with $200 and then tried to block your success? It was the personal dimension of the decision that I had been wrestling with privately. Could I set aside the history, the betrayal, the vindication of proving him wrong to work toward a larger goal? This isn't about Robert, I said after a thoughtful pause. It's about Elaine's vision and how we can most effectively advance it. If working within Horizon, even with Robert, allows us to impact more businesses and create more opportunities, then personal history becomes secondary to purpose. Imani, who had been quiet for most of the discussion, finally spoke. When we started Collective Edge, it was because Horizon had abandoned its commitment to smaller businesses. If we can restore that commitment from inside, with sufficient authority and resources, Isn't that the ultimate fulfillment of our mission? Her question cut through to the core of the matter, refocusing us on first principles rather than personalities or pride. The key is ensuring we have the authority and protection to actually implement change, I agreed. Not just titles, but real power to redirect resources and priorities. As day turned to evening, we developed a detailed framework for what we would need to make Bennett's proposition viable: board seats, budget controls, team integration guarantees, and explicit performance metrics tied to serving smaller businesses. Effectively. If we get everything on this list, would you do it? Marcus asked me directly as we prepared to adjourn. Work alongside Robert after everything that happened? I considered his question carefully. If it's the most effective path to realizing what Elaine believed in, what we all believe in, then yes. Success isn't about personal vindication. It's about impact. The next morning, I called Bennett to request a follow-up meeting, this time with both our full leadership teams present. We're prepared to discuss your proposition seriously, I explained, but with specific conditions that would need to be formalized before any agreement. Bennett agreed immediately, suggesting we meet at Horizon's Austin satellite office the following week. Bring your full team and your specific requirements, he said. We'll address this comprehensively. The week of preparation was intense. Legal, consultations, financial modeling, scenario planning, and countless discussions about how to structure leadership roles and responsibilities. We were no longer discussing a simple acquisition, but a complex merger of visions that would fundamentally reshape Horizon's strategy and culture. When the day arrived, our team entered Horizon's Austin office with confidence born of thorough preparation. The large conference room was already occupied by Horizon's delegation: Bennett, Robert, Patricia, Jason, and several other executives I recognized from my previous tenure. Bennett opened the meeting with a clear statement of intent. We're here to explore a leadership integration that would allow Horizon to reclaim its commitment to businesses of all sizes, with Collective Edge's team and technology as the cornerstone of that renewed commitment. I noted Robert's carefully neutral expression as Bennett essentially acknowledged that the strategy he had championed was being partially reversed. This couldn't be easy for him, yet he maintained professional composure, perhaps recognizing that his own future at Horizon depended on adapting to this new reality. Over the next 4 hours, we worked through the framework our team had developed, addressing everything from reporting structures and budget allocations to product roadmaps and market positioning. The discussion was detailed and occasionally tense, but consistently productive. When we reached the section about leadership roles, Robert finally spoke directly to me for the first time that day. You would effectively have authority over the division that represents Horizon's historical core business, he observed. That's an extraordinary level of responsibility for someone who has never managed an operation of this scale. The statement could have been interpreted as a challenge, but his tone lacked the condescension I had come to expect. Instead, it seemed like a genuine observation of the magnitude of what was being proposed. It is extraordinary, I acknowledged, but so is building a competing platform from scratch with minimal resources in less than 2 years. Different challenges require different skills, but the fundamental principles remain: understanding user needs, creating value through innovation, and building teams aligned around clear purpose. Bennett nodded approvingly. Well said, and, to be clear, this transition would include substantial support mechanisms. You wouldn't be operating in isolation, but with the full resources of Horizon behind you. By late afternoon, we had reached tentative agreement on a framework that would see me join Horizon as President and Chief Innovation Officer, with Marcus becoming CTO of the Small Business Division and Amani leading data science across both enterprise and small business segments. Collective Edge's platform would become the foundation for Horizon's renewed focus on smaller businesses, with our entire team integrated into the larger organization, but with protecting provisions for their roles and compensation. Most importantly, The agreement included explicit commitments to Elaine's founding principles: resource allocation guarantees, pricing structures that ensured accessibility, and board-level metrics evaluating success not just in financial terms, but in market democratization impact. As the meeting concluded, Bennett addressed both teams together. "What we're discussing isn't simple acquisition or merger. It's a recommitment to foundational purpose, facilitated by bringing together teams that approach the market from complementary perspectives. This kind of integration is challenging, but potentially transformative when executed with clarity and commitment." In the elevator heading down to the lobby, Marcus whispered, "Did we just negotiate our way from being kicked out with $200 to running half of Horizon?" I smiled slightly. "We negotiated our way from building something valuable with $200 to potentially scaling its impact exponentially. That's what matters." Over the following weeks, due diligence processes ran in parallel with increasingly detailed discussions about implementation. The more our teams interacted, the more evident it became that this unusual arrangement might actually work: collective edges, agility and innovation mindset complementing Horizon's scale and resources. Robert and I established a cautious professional rapport, focused entirely on business objectives rather than personal history. During one planning session, when someone referred awkwardly to my departure from Horizon, he surprised me by addressing it directly. "Let's be clear about historical context," he said. "Ms. Carter's previous tenure at Horizon ended through my decision, a decision that, with benefit of hindsight, failed to appreciate her value to the organization. That context is relevant to understanding how we arrived here, but not to where we're going." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of error that I hadn't expected from him. Perhaps Bennett had made clear that this new arrangement required clearing the air, or perhaps Robert had genuinely recognized the misjudgment. Either way, it helped establish a baseline of professional respect that would be necessary for the complex integration ahead. 6 weeks after our initial discussion with Bennett, all parties signed the final agreement. The press release announced, "Horizon Innovations recommits to serving businesses of all sizes through strategic integration with Collective Edge, highlighting the leadership team that would guide this renewed mission." The market responded positively, with Horizon stock rising 7% on the news. Industry analysts praised the move as addressing a strategic vulnerability while bringing in innovative leadership with proven success in an underserved market segment. My first official day at Horizon, or rather my first day returning to Horizon in a radically different capacity, was surreal in its symmetry. I walked through the same San Francisco lobby where I had once been escorted out, now greeted respectfully, by security staff who recognized me as part of the senior leadership team. The executive floor that had been transformed under Robert's tenure would now undergo another evolution, not back to exactly what it had been under Elaine, but to something that balanced formality with accessibility, tradition with innovation. As I settled into my new office, not Robert's corner suite, but a thoughtfully designed space that had once been a collaborative area, I placed 2 items on my desk: the framed photo of Elaine and me, and the printed deposit slip from when I had deposited that 197 hours, 42 severance check 16 months earlier. Together, they told the story not just of loss and return, but of purpose maintained through dramatic change. The journey from that severance check to this moment hadn't been about getting back at Robert or even proving my own capabilities, though both had happened along the way. It had been about honoring a vision larger than any individual career trajectory, Elaine's belief that technology should democratize opportunity rather than concentrate it. Bennett stopped by mid-morning, knocking lightly on my open door. "Getting settled in?" he asked, glancing around the space. "Starting to," I replied. "It feels both familiar and completely new." He nodded, noticing the deposit slip on my desk. "From your severance check?" "A reminder," I explained. "Not of what was taken away, but of how little it takes to start. Something meaningful if the purpose is clear enough." Bennett smiled. That's precisely why you're sitting in this office today. Many executives can manage resources. Few can create something significant from almost nothing. He turned to leave, then added, Elaine would be proud, not just of what you built, but of your willingness to set aside personal vindication for greater impact. As he departed, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 16 months. Being kicked out with just $200 had seemed like the end of a career path, a devastating setback orchestrated by someone who underestimated my resilience and commitment. Instead, it had become the catalyst for building something so valuable that the very people who had discarded me now welcomed me back with expanded authority and respect. The lesson wasn't that hardship automatically leads to triumph. Plenty of people face setbacks and never recover. Rather, it was that purpose provides both direction and fuel when resources are scarce. My $197, $42 hadn't been enough to live on for more than a few days, but it had been enough to begin working toward something meaningful. Each small step forward had created new possibilities, new connections, new resources that eventually culminated in this unprecedented opportunity. To effect change at scale, the true power wasn't in the money we start with, but in the clarity of purpose that guides how we use it. Robert had all of Horizon's resources at his disposal, but had lost sight of its founding purpose. I had begun with almost nothing but absolute clarity about what mattered, and that clarity had ultimately proven more valuable than all the corporate resources in the world. As I opened my laptop to begin my first day back at Horizon, I wasn't thinking about the past or even the vindication of the present. I was focused on the future, on the opportunities to expand access, to innovate in service of smaller businesses, to carry forward Elaine's vision at a scale I could never have achieved alone. Sometimes being kicked out with just $200 isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a much bigger one, if you're clear about what really matters and willing to build from there, one determined step at a time. My first board meeting as Horizon's President and Chief Innovation Officer was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, exactly 3 months after finalizing the integration agreement. I arrived at headquarters an hour early, reviewing my presentation, materials one last time while watching the early morning light illuminate San Francisco Bay through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The quarterly board meetings had always been Robert's domain during my previous tenure at Horizon, a rarefied space where strategy was debated and company direction determined. Today, I would present our comprehensive plan for revitalizing Horizon's small and mid-sized business division, built around Collective Edge's technology and approach. Bennett arrived first, his measured demeanor projecting quiet confidence. "Ready for the lion's den?" he asked with a small smile. "Ready," I confirmed, closing my laptop. The data is compelling, and early implementation results are exceeding projections. "Numbers matter," Bennett acknowledged, "but so does narrative. These board members need to understand not just what we're doing, but why it matters to Horizon's future." Over the next 20 minutes, the boardroom filled with Horizon's directors, venture capitalists, industry veterans, and financial experts who collectively guided the company's governance. Robert arrived last, nodding professionally in my direction before taking his seat. Bennett called the meeting to order, handling routine matters before introducing my presentation. "Today marks an important milestone in Horizon's strategic realignment," he explained. "Ms. Carter will present the first comprehensive analysis of our small business initiative since the Collective Edge integration." As I moved to the front of the room, I felt a momentary flash of imposter syndrome. Who was I to be addressing this group of accomplished business leaders? Then I remembered the journey that had brought me here, building Collective Edge from nothing, outmaneuvering competitors with vastly more resources, and earning this position through demonstrated results rather than connections or credentials. "Thank you, Chairman Bennett," I began, my voice steady and confident. 3 months ago, Horizon made a bold decision to recommit to serving businesses of all sizes. Today, I'm pleased to share not just our implementation progress, but the tangible impact this strategic realignment is already generating. For the next 40 minutes, I walked the board through our integrated approach, how we had combined Collective Edge's collaborative customer acquisition platform with Horizon's enterprise-grade infrastructure, creating a solution that maintained accessibility for smaller businesses while delivering robust capabilities previously available only to larger corporations. The initial results are compelling, I continued, highlighting key metrics on the projection screen. Customer acquisition in the small business segment has increased 142% quarter-over-quarter. Churn rates have decreased from 24% to just 7%. Most importantly, average customer lifetime value has nearly doubled as these businesses grow with our platform rather than outgrowing it. One of the venture capitalists leaned forward. "These are impressive numbers, Ms. Carter, but how does this affect our enterprise business? Are we cannibalizing higher-margin customers?" It was a legitimate question, one that got to the heart of Robert's original pivot away from smaller clients. Instead of becoming defensive, I welcomed the opportunity to address it directly. "We've specifically designed our segmentation to complement rather than compete with our enterprise offerings," I explained, advancing to the relevant slide. "By providing appropriate entry points for businesses at different stages, we're actually creating a growth pipeline that feeds our enterprise division as companies scale. In fact, we've already seen 7 mid-market clients upgrade to enterprise plans this quarter alone." Robert nodded slightly, acknowledging the validity of this approach. It represented a significant shift from his previous strategy but addressed a vulnerability he had likely recognized himself as Collective Edge began capturing market share. Another board member, the former CEO of a major software company, raised her hand. "The metrics are compelling, but I'm curious about the cultural integration. Collective Edge was a much smaller, presumably more agile organization. How is the team adapting to Horizon's established processes?" It was a perceptive question that cut to one of our greatest challenges. Rather than offering platitudes about seamless integration, I chose honesty. "The cultural integration has been both our biggest challenge and our greatest opportunity," I acknowledged. Collective Edge brought an entrepreneurial mindset and rapid innovation cycle that initially clashed with some of Horizon's more structured approaches. Rather than forcing one culture to conform to the other, we've been intentional about identifying the best elements of both. I advanced to a slide showing our new innovation process, a hybrid model that maintained necessary governance while creating space for rapid experimentation and customer-driven iteration. We've established what we call agility zones within the organization, areas where teams can operate with startup-like flexibility while still connecting to enterprise resources and infrastructure. The results have been remarkable, with new feature development time decreasing 62%, while quality metrics have actually improved. As I completed my presentation and opened the floor for deeper questions, I noticed a shift in how the board members engaged, not just with me, but with the fundamental strategy I was presenting. The skepticism that had been evident in some faces at the beginning had largely given way to cautious optimism, even excitement about the potential of our integrated approach. After nearly an hour of detailed discussion, Bennett called for a vote on our proposed budget allocation for the upcoming fiscal year, a critical test of the board's confidence in our direction. The approval was unanimous, including Robert's affirmative vote. As the meeting concluded and board members filtered out, several stopped to offer congratulations or ask follow-up questions about specific aspects of the strategy. Robert approached, last, waiting until we were relatively alone before speaking. "That was quite effective," he said, his tone professional, but carrying a note of genuine respect that I hadn't heard from him before. Particularly the customer pipeline visualization. It addresses concerns I've had about segmentation strategy for some time. Coming from Robert, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you," I replied simply. "The goal is creating value across all segments, not privileging one at the expense of others." He nodded thoughtfully. "I've been reviewing the innovation process you've implemented. There may be elements worth adapting for the enterprise division as well. Perhaps we could discuss potential cross-divisional applications next week?" The suggestion of collaborative problem-solving rather than territorial defense represented a significant evolution in our working relationship. "I'd welcome that conversation," I agreed. As Robert departed, Bennett approached with a satisfied expression. "That," he said quietly, "is what genuine leadership integration looks like. Not erasing differences or pretending past conflicts didn't exist, but finding productive common ground despite them." Over the following months, this pattern of cautious but increasingly genuine collaboration continued to develop. Robert and I established weekly strategy sessions where we addressed points of intersection between our divisions, identifying opportunities to leverage shared resources while maintaining distinct approaches appropriate to different market segments. The company's quarterly earnings reflected the success of this balanced approach. Enterprise revenues continued growing steadily, while the small business segment experienced explosive growth from its smaller base. Wall Street analysts who had previously questioned the strategic shift now highlighted Horizon's uniquely integrated market approach as a competitive advantage. 6 months into the new arrangement, an unexpected development accelerated our integration progress. A major competitor announced a new platform that directly targeted both our enterprise and small business customers, presenting a common threat that required coordinated response from both divisions. Robert called an emergency leadership meeting. That included both his enterprise team and my small business group, the first truly integrated strategic session since the Collective Edge acquisition. As we gathered in the main conference room, the tension was palpable. This competitive threat could either divide us further or become the catalyst for deeper collaboration. Future Systems' new platform specifically targets our customer base. Across segments, Robert began, displaying the competitor's announcement on the main screen. "They're claiming integration benefits similar to what we've been working toward, but with a unified code base and pricing structure designed to undercut us in both enterprise and small business sectors." I studied the announcement carefully. "They're overpromising," I observed. "A single platform can't effectively serve both Fortune 500 companies and local businesses without significant compromises on either scalability or usability." "Agreed," Robert nodded. "But perception matters as much as reality in the short term. We need a coordinated response that demonstrates why our segmented but integrated approach delivers superior value." What followed was the most productive strategic session I'd experienced since joining Horizon's leadership. Instead of divisional defensiveness, both teams engaged in genuine problem-solving, identifying our competitive advantages, developing messaging that highlighted the benefits of our approach, and creating action plans to demonstrate these advantages to existing and prospective customers. Most remarkably, Robert actively solicited my input on enterprise market positioning, while I sought his perspective on small business customer retention strategies. The artificial boundaries between our divisions began dissolving in the face of shared purpose. As the meeting concluded, Robert made an unexpected proposal. "We should consider restructuring our product development teams to better reflect this integrated approach," he suggested. "Not merging divisions entirely, but creating cross-functional teams that address specific customer needs regardless of business size." It was precisely the kind of structural evolution I had hoped would eventually emerge, but had expected would take years rather than months to develop. That could significantly accelerate our innovation cycle, I agreed, while ensuring consistent experience as customers grow from one segment to another. Robert nodded. "Why don't you and I work on a proposal together, something we can present jointly at the next board meeting?" As we left the conference room, Marcus fell into step beside me in the hallway. Did I just witness Robert Hayes voluntarily suggest giving up control over part of his organization to improve overall company effectiveness? He asked quietly, his tone somewhere between shock and amusement. You witnessed leadership evolution, I replied. Something that's much rarer than leadership entrenchment, but infinitely more valuable when it happens. The following weeks brought increased collaboration across divisions as we developed a unified response to the competitive threat. What had begun as defensive necessity gradually transformed into proactive strategic integration, with teams that had once operated in separate silos now routinely sharing insights and resources. Our joint restructuring proposal, presented to the board 2 months later, formalized this evolution, creating integrated teams focused on customer experience, data insights, and platform infrastructure while maintaining segment-specific expertise in areas where genuine differences in need existed. Bennett's satisfied expression as we concluded the presentation spoke volumes. This wasn't just an organizational reshuffling, but a fundamental evolution in how Horizon approached its market and mission. As the 1-year anniversary of the Collective Edge integration approached, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey while preparing for an industry keynote address. The speech would mark my first major public appearance as the face of Horizon's renewed commitment to businesses of all sizes. The night before the conference, I reviewed my presentation in my hotel room when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Carter, Lawrence Bennett suggested I reach out. I'm working on a profile of comeback executives for Harvard Business Review and would love to interview you about your journey from being terminated with minimal severance to rejoining Horizon in a leadership capacity. Your story is quite compelling. The message gave me pause. While the business outcomes of our integration were certainly worth sharing, I had deliberately avoided framing my return to Horizon as a personal vindication narrative. The true story wasn't about getting fired and coming back triumphant. It was about maintaining purpose through adversity and ultimately finding the most effective path to meaningful impact. After careful consideration, I declined the interview request, explaining that while I appreciated the interest, the focus should be on Horizon's strategic evolution rather than personalized narratives about individual executives. The next morning, as I prepared backstage for my keynote, Bennett unexpectedly appeared. I heard you declined the HBR profile, he said, his expression curious rather than critical. It wasn't the right framing, I explained. Making this about personal redemption undermines the more important story about mission continuity and strategic realignment. Bennett studied me thoughtfully. Most executives would jump at the opportunity for that kind of high-profile validation, particularly after what you experienced. I'm not interested in validation, I replied simply. I'm interested in impact. He smiled. And that, Megan, is precisely why you're succeeding where so many integration attempts fail. You've kept the mission at the center rather than ego or vindication. My keynote speech that day deliberately focused on Horizon's recommitment to serving businesses of all sizes, highlighting the technological innovations and customer success stories that had emerged from our integrated approach. I referenced Collective Edge as a catalyst for this evolution, but emphasized the collaborative implementation rather than my personal journey. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with industry analysts particularly noting the coherent vision that now unified Horizon's previously fragmented market approach. Several competitors' executives were in the audience, their expressions revealing concern about Horizon's strengthened position across market segments. As I concluded my presentation and the applause faded, I noticed Robert standing at the back of the hall. I hadn't been aware he was attending the conference, and his presence at my keynote suggested a level of professional support I wouldn't have thought possible 18 months earlier. He approached as I gathered my materials, his expression thoughtful. Effective message, he said, particularly how you position the integration as evolution rather than correction. It's more accurate that way, I replied. Companies must evolve as markets change. The challenge is maintaining core purpose through that evolution. He nodded slowly. A challenge I failed to meet when I took over after Elaine's death, he acknowledged, surprising me with his candor. I confused strategy with purpose, forgetting that one serves the other, not the other way around. It was the most direct recognition he had ever offered about the fundamental misstep in his leadership approach, and perhaps, implicitly, about his decision to remove me from the company. What matters is where we go from here, I said, choosing to focus forward rather than dwelling on past errors. The integrated approach is working. That validates both perspectives while creating something stronger than either could achieve alone. Robert considered this for a moment. Bennett mentioned you declined an HBR profile, he said finally. Most people in your position would have used it to cement a triumphant narrative. Triumphant narratives make for good magazine articles but problematic leadership foundations, I replied. This isn't about who was right or wrong. It's about serving our customers effectively while creating opportunities for businesses that might otherwise be excluded from powerful tools. A hint of genuine smile crossed his typically reserved expression. Elaine said something similar when I proposed our first enterprise pivot 5 years ago. She agreed to explore the market but insisted we maintain our commitment to smaller businesses, simultaneously. His expression clouded slightly. I should have remembered that balanced approach after she was gone. The acknowledgement, offered voluntarily rather than extracted reluctantly, represented a profound evolution in both our professional relationship and Robert's own leadership perspective. We're finding that balance now, I offered. That's what matters. As we walked together toward the conference networking event, a young entrepreneur approached somewhat hesitantly. Ms. Carter? I just wanted to say thank you. My company started using Horizon's platform 6 months ago after being told for years we were too small to benefit from that level of technology. It's transformed our customer acquisition process completely. I introduced her to Robert, explaining his role in our integrated approach. Rather than distancing himself from the small business initiative that contrasted with his previous strategy, he engaged genuinely with her questions about upcoming features and integration capabilities. That moment crystallized how far we had come, not just in business metrics or organizational structure, but in fundamental purpose alignment. What had begun as reluctant accommodation had evolved into genuine recommitment to Horizon's foundational mission. 18 months after being escorted from the building with just $200 in severance, I wasn't simply back at Horizon with a bigger title and more authority. I was part of a leadership team that had rediscovered its core purpose while developing the maturity to integrate apparently conflicting approaches into something more powerful than either could be alone. The journey from that 197.42 severance check to this moment contained lessons far more valuable than any simple narrative of redemption or revenge could capture. It wasn't about proving Robert wrong or myself right. It wasn't even about personal success or vindication. It was about maintaining clarity of purpose through drastic changes in circumstance, finding creativity in constraint, and ultimately choosing impact over ego when unexpected opportunities emerged. Being kicked out with just $200 had seemed like career devastation at the time. In retrospect, it was the catalyst that forced me to distill what truly mattered about Elaine's vision into something clear and compelling enough to build from nearly nothing. That clarity became Collective Edge's foundation, which in turn became the seed of Horizon's renewal. The most profound leadership lesson wasn't that hardship guarantees eventual triumph, but that purpose provides direction when resources are scarce. My 197. 42er hadn't been enough to live on for more than a few days, but it had been enough to begin working towards something meaningful. Each small step forward had created new possibilities, new connections, new resources that eventually culminated in the opportunity to effect change at a scale I could never have achieved alone. As the conference day concluded and I returned to my hotel, I found a small package waiting at the front desk. Opening it in my room, I discovered a beautifully framed document, my original Horizon offer letter from 5 years earlier, signed by Elaine Foster. A note from Bennett accompanied it. Found this in the archives while researching company history for the annual report. Thought you might appreciate the symmetry between where you started and where you've arrived. Elaine saw something in you. Then that the rest of us are fortunate to benefit from now. LB. The gesture was thoughtful, but it was the document itself that moved me deeply. Elaine's signature at the bottom of that first offer letter connected directly to where I now stood. Not through uninterrupted ascension, but through challenge, setback, rebuilding, and ultimately integration of seemingly opposing paths into something stronger than either could be alone. The true power wasn't in the title on my current business card or the authority I now wielded, but in the continuity of purpose that had guided every decision from that first offer through being terminated with $200 to building Collective Edge to returning as Horizon's president. The circumstances had changed dramatically, but the fundamental commitment to democratizing access to powerful business tools had remained constant throughout. The journey wasn't over. It never is for organizations committed to meaningful evolution, rather than mere survival. But this milestone offered a moment to appreciate that sometimes our most difficult setbacks create the conditions for our most meaningful contributions. Not because hardship automatically leads to success, but because adversity strips away everything except what truly matters, revealing purpose with a clarity that comfort rarely provides. My $197. $42 severance hadn't been an ending, but a beginning. The seed capital for building something that ultimately transformed not just my own trajectory, but Horizon's direction and thousands of customers' possibilities. The lesson wasn't that you should hope to get kicked out with minimal resources, but that when such moments occur, clarity of purpose becomes your most valuable asset, worth considerably more than whatever dollars may or may not be in your account. As I prepared for the next day's conference sessions, I tucked Elaine's offer letter into my briefcase as a reminder of both where this journey had begun and why it mattered beyond personal advancement or vindication. The path from being kicked out with $200 to leading Horizon's strategic renewal hadn't been about proving critics wrong, but about proving purpose right, demonstrating that commitment to meaningful impact creates possibilities that transcend whatever resources or limitations we currently face. Sometimes the smallest beginnings create the most significant opportunities, not despite the constraints, but because those very limitations force us to distill our purpose to its essence and build from there with absolute clarity about what truly matters. That clarity, more than any amount of initial capital, determines how far we can ultimately go and how much impact we can ultimately have. Being kicked out with just $200 wasn't the end of my story. It was the clarifying moment that revealed what had always been most important, and became the first step toward achieving it at a scale I could never have imagined on that rainy afternoon in the parking lot, watching the security guard collect my badge while wondering what came next. What came next, it turned out, was everything that mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.